Right, Chair, we're ready to go.
Okay, good morning, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to this meeting of the Safer Hartlepool Partnership. Obviously, this meeting is a remote one and will be live streamed and added to our website as a recording. I'll now hand over to Denise Wimperney from Democratic Services Team.
Thank you, Chair. We'll begin the meeting by way of a roll call of all those in attendance remotely. And may I request members to confirm they have a paper copy of the agenda and can both hear and see councillors in the meeting. I will now begin the roll call. Councillor Moore is present and has the paperwork, Chair. Councillor Tennant.
Present, I have the paperwork.
Tony Hanson.
Yep, present, and I have the paperwork.
Denise McGuckin. Craig Blundridge.
Yep, present, and I have the paperwork.
Thank you. Jill Harrison. We have Jill Harrison's apologies with John Lovett as substitute. I understand John is in attendance, is that correct?
In attendance, I have the paperwork, thank you.
Thanks, John. Sharon Cooney.
Can I give my apologies for Sharon Cooney, please? It's Peter Graham and I have the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Aldroyd. Right. And Peter Graham we've got as present. Anne Powell. No. Darren Redgewell of Durham Tees Valley Community Rehabilitation Company. No.
Present, I don't have a copy of the agenda.
Right, thank you. Kevin Harrison, Cleveland Fire.
Hi, no, Kev Harrison doesn't attend anymore. My name is Nick Jones. I'm from Cleveland Fire Brigade. I've got access to the papers as well. So Kev won't be attending anymore, it'll be myself.
Oh, yeah, thank you. We've noted that. Joanne Hodgkinson.
Present, Denise, and thank you. I've received the papers.
Thank you. Angela Corner.
Yes, in attendance, and I've got access to the paperwork.
Thank you. Michael Houghton.
Yeah, morning, in attendance. I've got the paperwork. Unfortunately, I need to dial off just before 11 o'clock for another meeting. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Sally Robinson. No. And that concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Denise. Are there any other apologies for absence from anybody not mentioned? We've got Mark's hand up.
Sorry, I've just joined a little late, so I missed the roll call. Apologies for that. It's Sarah Wilson from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. And I've got Mark with your hand up. Mark Doughty.
Morning, I'm the Demand Inspector for the Police Control Room.
Great, thank you very much, Mark. Councillor Richardson.
Also present.
Paperwork was on. Okay. Are there any declarations of interest by members for today's agenda? Councillor Buchan.
No, just to say I was actually here, that's all.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Buchan. No declarations of interest. Then we'll move on to the minutes from the last meeting that was held on the 4th of September. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? And if so, can you raise them now? Otherwise, we'll take them as a record and approve them. Okay, happy to approve then. Thank you. Got a presentation on the force control room update from, I believe this is you, Mark. Is that right?
Yeah, has everybody got a copy, Chair?
We have the presentation. Somebody from this end is going to put up on the screen for everybody.
Lovely, much obliged. Good to start?
We're just, there we go. It's loading up now.
Smashing. Is the going through the slides? Are you okay to progress the presentation at your end?
Yeah. If you just let us know when you want to move forward, we'll make progress.
Smashing. Thank you very much. I think first and foremost, for those of you who haven't met me, I used to work in Hartlepool. I was a neighbourhood policing sergeant on the central team. I was responsible for Stranton Ward. So I'm well versed in the issues that Hartlepool face, particularly as a multi-agency setting. I've since moved to the control room, as you can see, where I'm working on analysing our demand and looking at the ways we can better serve our communities, with us in the control room being a central hub for that. Very quick overview on the next slide of what I'm going to go through this morning. I promise you it won't be onerous. The new structure that we're embracing at the moment: staff returning to Cleveland Police from SOC Posterior, risk assessment and crime allocation tools that we've brought in, a review of our demand, implementation of our vulnerability desk, and a new structure and some futures that I want to talk about that I find them quite exciting, but that remains to be seen. Just a word on our new structure on the next slide. For those of you who haven't met him, ACC for local policing, Steve Graham. He's been in the force for probably about 14 months now, and he's taken the lead on neighbourhood policing, etc. Under him, we've got Chief Superintendent Chris Downs, who's responsible for local policing, but I work to him under the control room. Superintendent Galloway, she's the operational lead in the force control room. And both of those officers have worked in Hartlepool before, both serving on the south side. As memory provides, it was Jutland Road and Oughton Manor many years ago, probably 2005-06. And then within that, we've got a vulnerability desk, our operational teams in the control room, and a support function. I'll come on to that again a bit later. The next slide's incredibly busy, but I want to just give you some reassurance about how we're doing business now. We have 4 operational teams in the force control room. Primarily, it's been the structure it's always been, and I'll come on to that again later. What's important is that as we move on through the years, we've recognised the increased risk. You'll notice that we have 4 chief inspectors, each heading up an operational team inside the control room. They take some of the demand away when we have firearms and more serious incidents, such as the Jessup incidents that we work with the fire service and the health service on. This frees up the inspector rank so that they can actually undertake the day-to-day business. It's a covering option, and it provides 24/7 cover for those bigger scale jobs. It'll then be apparent we've got a sergeant and a supervisor. The supervisor takes care of the dispatch role, so that's telling the cops where they're needed, the speed at which they're needed, etc., and the details of the jobs. The sergeant actually takes care of performance in our call handling room. It's not just telephone calls, there are email ways into the police, and we're looking at some other stuff that I'll come on to later. We now have an EFCO, which is a support role again. They're able to provide the Clare's Law and Sarah's Law disclosures when requested, and also do checks relating to those higher level jobs. And then we've got teams of FCOs trained in various aspects of the control room and the police service. They're the ones who've moved from SOC Posterior to Cleveland Police, and I'll just come on to sort of their roles on the next slide. We've got 2 functions, as you can see. The demand function is about the calls coming in. I'm going to give you some information about that. I promise it's not too onerous, but essentially, these are the people who will make contact or take that first contact with members of the public via telephone, via email, and I've mentioned futures on there that I'll come back to. It won't have escaped some of you that we were criticised to some degree for our crime recording. We weren't doing it in line with NCRS, which is the legislation to which we have to provide, and that's a return for the Home Office. There is a bigger picture around this, which is the recognition that when we record a crime, it's sort of officially recognised as a victim in terms of the national picture. So there was a lot of work we've undertaken with that to ensure that our crime is now recorded in line with that 24-hour time bar that we've got. That's then returned to the Home Office, but it also ensures that we're capturing all victims within that statutory period. We move forward in terms of desktop investigation. These are FCOs who can now sit at a laptop at home for some, desktop in the control room for others. We've got a system called NICE where we can now look at preparing CCTV, preparing still images, looking at audio recordings or listening to audio recordings to provide evidential content. We can start preparing a package for when we send an investigation out to an officer on the streets. It's incumbent that we get that right, because when we send that package out, it lessens the workload of the officers on the front line, therefore frees them up to deal with some of the more pressing matters that come in. The crime management unit at the bottom was actually removed late last year. And as a result, we think this has contributed to the decline in the data integrity, which is sending back to the Home Office. These are real gatekeeper functions that we've now reinstilled. There was a view to move to omnicompetence, but we've now got the crime management unit back up and running, and they provide a level of expertise in terms of identifying crimes, identifying victimology, and ensuring that the victim gets an enhanced service right until the crime is closed by Cleveland Police. Within the dispatch function, we've ensured that we've got the right number of dispatchers, which may seem a little twee, but it's certainly in terms of when we're looking at COVID, when we're looking at dividing our room between two sites, which we've done, it's been Redcar and Middlesbrough. We've been able to assess the need for our staff, backups, etc., and been able to ensure that the dispatch function, the core function, is catered for. I'll come on to risk assessments of crime and criminality and incidents in a moment, but a key facet of their role is to carry out risk assessments, the management of our resources on the streets. Some have specialist responsibility for firearms, pursuit, etc. And when it comes to cops closing jobs, they're the gatekeepers as well at the first instance to ensure that we've done everything in terms of protecting, safeguarding the victim. So they'll be asking questions like, have you put a PPN in? Have you referred this person to child services? Is there a mental health requirement, etc.? Just to join up that partnership approach to how we service our victims and callers. On the next page, we've reinvigorated Thrive and we've brought in something called the CAF. And very quickly, Thrive never featured particularly well as part of a continuous process. What we've done since February, I've created some rolling training on Thrive. So it's the national model for identifying threat, harm and risk and vulnerability of victims, as well as the safest way to engage with them. Every incident has Thrive applied to it. So every call, every contact we get, we'll apply Thrive to it. Is there a threat? What is the risk of harm, etc.? We've formalised that now. So at the start of 2020, we brought in an online assessment tool. So that records the officer's decision making and provides a weighted scoring of responses to inform risk decisions. I'm really cautious about that sounding like almost a robot or an algorithm. It's not. Cops can override it. What it does do is steer us to better ways to engage with victims and recognise the risk of harm, so enhance safeguarding. It is a nationally recognised model, and it's now built into a rolling programme of continuous professional development. So every 4 weeks, the teams get a training day, and we'll input on one aspect of Thrive, the T, the H, the R, the I, the V or the E, and we'll look at how they can service those. We'll also take lessons learned and give them out. The CAF, the Crime Assessment and Allocation Framework, was brought in. It was originally cited as a rather expensive piece of software that actually took the decision making away from humans. It was really expensive. It was, I think it was about £20,000 per crime category. And as you know, we have plenty of crime categories, so it was perhaps a little bit big. But what we've done is we've identified that we can make similar inroads by using this Crime Assessment and Allocation Framework tool. What it does, it identifies lines of inquiry, proportionality, public interest, and which department's best placed to investigate a crime. Is your burglary going to CID? These might seem relatively simple questions. You'd like to think that your burglary is going to CID. There are crimes that blur the lines between the two, and this is just to give some advice, some assistance to pointing the investigator in the right direction. It ensures that the crime report is given the same criteria, so we're not relying on individuals and experience in terms of, oh, that's a crime, or perhaps cops who are working in the control room saying, oh, that'll go nowhere because I've done this before. It takes out that unconscious bias, and it provides a level playing field for the assessment of all crimes. It can be overridden. That experience, that knowledge, where applicable, can be overridden and written in with a decent decision, and it requires that decision-making rationale as to why we've assigned a crime somewhere and the investigative leads that we've undertaken with it, and why a crime should be screened in, or conversely, screened out. I want to give some reassurance that the crimes that reflect most on our vulnerable communities, hate crime and other high-risk areas, will always be screened in. On the next slide, I certainly don't wish to bore anyone with the figures, but under the terms of the review of the force control room, I carried out a demand analysis. There were key areas that had over time failed to recognise the demand on the force control room and the requirement for staffing. We noticed we were abandoning calls effectively, and we were struggling to queue jobs. The demand analysis was undertaken. It followed the hypothesised profile, which, as you may predict, is sort of less calls at 6 o'clock in the morning, with an increase in calls from about 1,400 to 2,300 hours. And as such, there's been a change in the shift pattern. The previous 4-on, 4-off model is now going to a 6-on, 4-off shift pattern that better affords staffing across that peak demand period in the middle of the day. The peak was originally 10 till 2100 across all days of the week. We have noticed a slight shift as a result of the COVID regulations, etc. But the shift pattern will cope with those and provide us with that ability to provide a service for all callers. The new pattern is going to commence in 2021, and the consultation period and subsequent staffing allocations already taken place. In terms of the identification of key demand on the next slide, we've actually done some analysis in terms of incidents and what we get most commonly reported to the force control room. We didn't suffer massively because of COVID in lockdown 1. Obviously, the second lockdown and more stringent rules around fines, etc., have resulted in increases in the volume of calls, although they're being handled mainly by Single Online Home, which is via reporting via the website. It won't surprise, I don't think, that mental health incidents and missing persons are a key area of demand, quite a large amount of demand. And we recognise that we haven't moved with the times, so we're seeking to redress this. That'll be done I've just been responsible for updating our missing from home operating procedures. There's a lot of work to do still on it. It's still at consultation, but the bulk of the work's done. And in terms of mental health, we're looking at some aspects that I'll talk about in a minute. Some of the new processes being brought in will enhance our ability to serve the public and continue making improvements on the victim focus, streamline our investigative processes. I'll just go through them on the next slide. Live chat and the provision of a social media desk is used to great effect across forces across the country. Staffordshire, Merseyside particularly well. We're currently engaged in a procurement process to identify a cost-effective and functional chat system. It's about reaching out. It's about creating that ability for all people to contact us. Millennials are identified as a key group, people who don't particularly like to talk on the phone, they would rather chat via a messenger type service. And we've also done some work in and around our hard to reach groups who will be furnished, and that communication will be enhanced by the implementation of a live chat system. There are a number of systems and providers that we've looked at. Fourth quarter 2020 is when we're looking to implement the actual live chat function. So that's in the next 2 months. I hasten to add that live chat's one facet. So we're looking at a complete media desk. So that's to provide us with forward-facing Facebook and Twitter messages and messages through those systems. Also, the ability to send messages via WhatsApp or other media to people who require contact with us. It'll be a chat window. It'll use a series of chat bots and canned messages, which are essentially signposts. If you're ringing about a matter that isn't for the police, that is for the council, it can be emailed from the chat bot for the attention of the relevant local area council. The chat, where appropriate, will be sent to a live operator, so you can still talk to a human being. They'll be fully auditable. We can take crimes, offer advice, signpost and contact partners from reports made through live chat. And it's recognised quite nationally now. There's actually a central provider, although they haven't come forward with any costs yet. It's particularly good for speaking to English, where people don't have English as a first language, as a translation function, and it also provides provision for those who are hard of hearing or have difficulties in communicating by telephone. Essentially, we're a bit behind the times, but we're moving fast to get up to speed and certainly lead the way in terms of a media desk so we can start bringing in those avenues of communication for people. A little about the vulnerability desk. We implemented a vulnerability desk to continue to work in the force control room. This is comprised of 4 shift teachers, a sergeant and 4 PCs working under an inspector. At the moment, the desk mainly deals with domestic abuse. It ensures that safeguarding, offender statuses and evidential matters are included in incident reports to better inform the investigating officer and the courts. So they'll pull 999 calls where there's been a disturbance heard. They'll create vulnerability forms and risk assessments, etc. They also deal with Clare's Law and Sarah's Law disclosures, which are key in reducing abuse. And following a pilot of this function, we recognise that we've really got the power now to open up that vulnerability picture, to service that vulnerability picture from within the control room. We've currently got cover from VCAS in the control room, who now sit alongside our vulnerability desk. We're welcoming the mental health triage teams back into the control room who went. And as we look towards the future, I'm looking to bring in IDVAs, that's the domestic violence advocates, and the advisors and the missing from home experts, so that we take all those facets of demand and we can service them at the first point of call. It also recognises that signposting aspect where we've really got the victim who needs help and we don't let them cool off, as it's known, before a cop gets there or before the referral's put in by a police officer. We get that first advice and signposting at the very first inception. A bit about abandonment reduction on the next slide. The Home Office now seek to report on the number of calls abandoned. We recognise a number of issues contributing to our abandonment rate. First and foremost, our welcome message for those of you who've called Cleveland Police was very long. You got about 2 minutes before you even got into a queue for a control room. We've taken that down to 43 seconds, so we're abandoning less as a result of that. And the change we made in the recording message actually now directs calls better. So rather than being given 4, 5, 6 options, there are 4, and you will get through to the department you want to do. We do have a team of multi-skilled operators. So if we get periods of anomalous demand, we can change the functions of our operators to a higher priority. So we can put people on calls if we're getting more calls. For example, an emerging incident like an RTC on the A19. And the social media desk I've already alluded to will facilitate inquiries and trend analysis, forward messaging and engagement. And we're looking at a system called crowd control, which is an amalgamator to find out what the chatter is on social media, where Cleveland Police or criminality or incidents are mentioned. Just a little bit about the futures. You may appreciate data protection, etc., precluded us from, to some extent, precluded us from sending call takers home during COVID and them taking calls. We've now been able to identify a system that will allow that. So whilst we may not have physical bodies in the control room, certainly during periods of lockdown, etc., we're able to still take calls and furnish the demand. We've upgraded the command and control system. It's easier to dispatch and assign officers now. It's a lot more visual. We've got the enhanced FCOs. These are specialisms that can contribute to a variety of functions across the piece. And when we bring in the social media desk, we've done some work with our current telephony provider, and we've identified that they can do voice analytics. It's a future. It's very much on the horizon. A couple of forces are using it at the moment, and it's those routing of calls where we recognise that there's a stressor, or there is anger, or there is, it's particularly good at picking up mental health and people who are of low mood, etc. And expressions. It recognises terms such as suicide and other terms associated with harm, etc., to route them appropriately. So that might not be in the first instance to wait in a queue. That would be to perhaps a 999 operator who can pick up the call immediately, refer on. And when the vulnerability desk staffed with street triage, we can get that mental health provision in immediately. Again, the same with domestic abuse. The call comes in, there's been a disturbance in the background. We can dispatch cops and have the caller receiving the support they need from the domestic abuse specialists. A whistle-stop tour, I'm sure you'll appreciate. I'm very cautious about throwing figures at people. There has been a reduction in the abandoned calls. As you may appreciate, we've continued, as I said, to service MISPAs and mental health incidents, as well as the other things that you read about in the press. It's not an easy role, it's a challenging role, but it's one we're committed to enhancing the service of. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much for that, Mark. It was really interesting. There's just two questions from me. The missing from home part you mentioned there. It's great to see you're progressing with that. And for me, it can't come soon enough, especially given the current circumstances and what we've seen earlier this year. I just wondered if you had a rough time frame as to when you think that will be coming online.
Yeah, I actually presented it to our executive about 3 weeks ago. They had some queries about children's passports and the further working with. I've been working with the children's safeguarding heads to give you some assurance that I'm not just freewheeling. So I've been working to a joint operating procedure with them. I've got to do the same with the Tees Weir Valley Mental Health Services, which the emails have been sent. I just want to get a meeting together to explain to them, and I'd like to see it live before the end of this year.
That would be great. Thank you. And the only other one, it's kind of a comment as, it's more of a comment, but a question as well. It's just one of the most common complaints that I know the members receive is historically there's a perception that when a crime's been recorded, it's some of them get lost in the system and that there is no follow-up. And I think one of the points that you picked up on there, I hope is going to fix that, because it seems to have led to a bit of a loss of confidence and an unwillingness for people to report things in the future. But you mentioned there about the crime and data management roles and hoping that by bringing them back into place, that will help chase things up. So I'm hopeful that will be a positive step, and that you'll be able to rebuild that confidence with some people who may have lost it.
I'd like to think so. There's a real piece for the members present. There's a real piece about listening to our communities, and part of that role of the function that you've just mentioned is that they will pick up that the victim hasn't been serviced appropriately, and what we're doing is we're actually empowering them to ring the victim back and say, look, this hasn't been done properly. We need to do X, Y, and Z to deal with you as a victim of crime. You know, and we'll send it back out to a cop, but that first contact will be, we know we got it wrong. We're putting the wheel back on. A cop will be out to see you. I think that's a massive piece of the engagement that we didn't do. We didn't get right, absolutely, and it needed redressing.
No, I just think it's absolutely great that that's been picked up, to be honest, Mark. And it sounds like it should be a really positive step. So thank you. I've got Pete Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, thanks for the presentation, and a personal thank you, because I haven't worked in control room for more than 4 years. It's a real risk pressure environment, and I know it's difficult to work in there. So to make that sort of progress is fantastic, and it'll help the partnership. But a couple of questions from me, just to help the partnership, if you don't mind. It sort of gives the world that we work in. But can you just describe the total average daily calls that the control room receive per day, the number of incidents that translates to, just an average figure, and how many are those that we have to respond to either immediately or within the hour? Because that'll give a feeling of what you're dealing with in control room. Thank you.
75.7% of our demand requires a response within the hour, to give you some idea. So those responses will come not only from cops, if you like, they may be from ARV cops, they may be from our partners that we work with. I'm just going to pull up some figures because it's quite amazing that we. Sorry about this. We do take a daily figures toll. I'm just bringing them up because what I want to do is I'll give you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of the actual categories of figures, if the members would find that helpful. Sorry about this. Right, we're away. It's just loaded. So we record the key facets, obviously. So what I'm talking about in the first instance is those calls that are going to cause damage to people, the higher vulnerability. So we get around about, in a 12-hour shift, we get about 1,101 calls on a day shift, for example, of which we get domestic abuse priorities, making up about 5% of those. That's domestic abuse, where we've got to get there. There's an incident ongoing. 999 calls. I'll give you an example. Yesterday we got 211 in the first in the 12-hour shift, the first day shift. Now, key for these is abandonment rates. So we get calls. There's been an issue identified in terms of the number of calls we get, which is that they're actually coming through into our system, and it's coming into effectively a spaghetti junction. Calls come in, and there's no more operator telephone. It's a virtual system, and we were looking to map out exactly where we put our calls. The key for that is that we've actually got no one who can tell us, so we've had to go down the route of now we're getting the company who provide the telephony in to actually map out where our calls go due to a bit of the confusion around it. That creates some of those abandoned. So key for me, just to mention it, we had 3 abandoned 999 calls yesterday. That's not good enough. But when we delve into the reporting, we look at why, and some of those are less than 10 seconds, some of those are just over 10 seconds and therefore recordable, etc. We had 60 101 calls abandoned, but they aren't necessarily all calls for service from the public. It may be as much as an alarm company telling us that they've installed an alarm somewhere. There's other demand that's sort of unforeseen in that. Then within that, as we go through the day, obviously there's an increase in calls across that busy period that we noticed. The abandonment rate for that does increase. We're not going to deny that. But what we are saying is that as we reach out and increase our ability to use the media desk, the forward-facing desk, then we can start looking at how we service those people who actually would abandon a call normally, but won't because there's an alternative way of communicating with us. I'm just pulling up some other stats for you very quickly. I do apologise. I'm working at home, so the internet's not as good. So very quick look, 7 till 7 yesterday, 7 till 7 days yesterday. We got 598 101 calls. In the last 7 days, that averages out about 624 in a 12-hour period. That's for day shifts, bear in mind. In terms of 999 calls on a daily period, we sort of look at 218 on average again, but that's the 7 till 7 days. We can then increase that over. It's about 268 every single day for 7/7 days to backs or days to evening. Off the back of those, we will create incidents. Obviously, some of them will create incidents. So over the last 12 months, we've created about 539 incidents on average over those 999 and 101 calls per day. So that gives you an idea of the sort of demand that we're dealing with. Of those, we tend to deal with about 186 that are resolved without deployment. That is, they don't go out of the force control room. The inquiries are done by the desktop investigators, or signposting or other bureaucratic processes are completed to ensure that the victim gets a service, but it doesn't actually go to a frontline cop.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members? Doesn't look like it. Right, thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate
Any concerns, Chair? I'm more than happy to take an email, specifically if it's about singular incidents and things like that. I am more than happy to receive an email and give some personal feedback, allocate jobs, etc. And I just want to make it clear that we are committed to that improvement.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so the next item for consideration then is agenda item 5.1, and it's the Community Safety Plan for 2020-2021. And I believe Sylvia Pinkney will take this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this item is to seek the approval of the Safer Hartlepool Partnership for the final draft of the Community Safety Plan. In addition, we're also asking the partnership to amend the dates for the when the future strategic assessment is carried out. The Community Safety Partnership have a statutory responsibility to develop and implement a community safety strategy, setting out how it intends to address crime and disorder, substance misuse, and reoffending issues. The existing plan was it was in March 2020, and it was came to an end because it dealt with 2017 to 2020. We have been working with the partners to develop a new plan, and the strategic objective of the plan is to make Hartlepool a safer, prosperous and enjoyable place to live and work. And the key priorities that are detailed in the plan are drugs and alcohol, antisocial behaviour and domestic violence. The Safer Hartlepool Partnership at its meeting in September 2020 agreed that we could go out for consultation in relation to this plan, and an 8-week consultation plan period was undertaken. The public consultation included online survey and direct consultation with Cleveland Police and Crime Commissioner, Hartlepool Borough Council's Finance and Policy and Audit and Governance Committees. Although there were relatively low uptake in relation to the online survey, there was a strong agreement with the proposed strategic objective and the priorities that were detailed. The feedback from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner also confirmed that the Community Safety Plan supported the objectives of the Police and Crime Plan. The delivery of the Community Safety Plan will be via existing agencies, organisations and through partnership working. Performance will be monitored by the existing Neighbourhood Safety Group and reported back to the Safer Hartlepool Partnership. The Community Safety Plan incorporates a number of performance indicators, and those will be used to measure and monitor the performance of the 3 key priority areas. In addition, we're asking in relation to the strategic assessment, prior to carrying out the Community Safety Plan being prepared, it's necessary that we undertake the strategic assessment to identify community safety issues affecting the town and to consult with the public around these. This helps develop the Community Safety Plan. Typically, the strategic assessment takes around 3 months to prepare, including an 8 weeks consultation period. Currently, this period runs from January to the 31st of December each year, meaning that we've got insufficient time to provide, to pull together the information for the strategic assessment, put that into Community Safety Plan for implementation in April. We're therefore requesting that the strategic assessment be brought forward to cover a period from the 1st of October to the 30th of September. The recommendation is that the partnership approves the Community Safety Plan for 2020/2021 and approves the changes to the period that the strategic assessment is carried out from the 1st of October to the 30th of September each year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Obviously, this report's been to the partnership before, and I'm sure members have had sight of it previously, potentially through other committees as well. I think it's a little bit disappointing we didn't get as much engagement as we probably would have liked to in the public consultation, but still the feedback has been quite positive on that, so we should be at least thankful for that. Are there any questions or comments from members for Sylvia? Looks like you're getting off quite lightly then. Right then, the recommendations set out in the report at 11 are that we approve the Community Safety Plan for 2020-21 and that the SHP approves the change to the period to be assessed for the future strategic assessments from the 1st of October until the 30th of September each year. Is everybody happy to agree to those recommendations? Are there any dissent? Or is there any dissent, sorry? Doesn't look like it. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you, Sylvia. And we'll move on to 5.2, the SHP performance. Rachel, are you taking this one?
I am, Chair. Yes, thank you. Apologies, my camera has decided not to switch on this morning, so I do apologise for that. Yeah, the purpose of this report is to provide an overview of the Safer Hartlepool Partnership performance for Q1 and 2 of 2020, so April to September, against key indicators linked to the priorities outlined in the Community Safety Plan, which Sylvia has just mentioned are antisocial behaviour, drugs and alcohol, and domestic violence. The report attached at Appendix A provides that overview with some comparisons made to the same time period in the previous year where appropriate. So if I just move to Appendix A, Chair, the indicators identified to assist with the monitoring of the priority of antisocial behaviour include, amongst others, the antisocial behaviour incidents reported to the police, noise complaints to the council, fly tipping, deliberate fires, and as we can see from the information contained, antisocial behaviour incidents reported to the police in Hartlepool increased by 70% in Q1 when compared to the previous year. It is reasonable. I know Mark said that the police weren't particularly overwhelmed by COVID, but I think it is reasonable to suggest that some of the increase is as a result of lockdown restrictions which were imposed to slow the spread of COVID-19 in the first financial quarter of this year. There were a number of antisocial behaviour incidents reported which related to possible breach of these. However, the increase was not unique to Hartlepool, as antisocial behaviour incidents increased across all 4 of the local policing areas in Cleveland. Unlike the police incidents, though, the antisocial behaviour complaints received by the community safety team reduced in this quarter. Some of that reduction can be predominantly linked to a reduction in complaints about antisocial behaviour in Roscommon Park, as in the previous year we were dealing with a high number of issues in that area. And again, it's possible that the lockdown restrictions prompted people to contact the police rather than the team at this time, given people were concerned that people were not following the rules or abiding by the laws. We also have information from 13 Group, and they also experienced an increase in antisocial behaviour cases compared to the same period as last year, and noise complaints received by the council's public protection team increased by just over 2/3. With lots of people spending significantly longer periods of time in their homes during this period, it is possible that this increase may be reflective of this. There's a lot of us who are now working from home and who are not usually in our properties for a large proportion of the day. So we do think that that may have had an impact. So whilst fly tipping reports increased by 54%, the number of deliberate fires actually reduced. And this reduction was reflective of a Cleveland-wide reduction. Again, lockdown restrictions may have had a beneficial effect, but during this period, Hartlepool Community Safety Team did undertake a proactive approach to prevent and deter individuals from setting deliberate fires, and that included patrols in hotspot areas and increased publicity to raise the awareness of the dangers of fire setting. So if I move on to drugs and alcohol, the indicators for this priority include drug offences recorded by the police, along with a number of measures relating to drug and alcohol treatment, as is identified in the table on page 5. The increase in drug offences recorded by the police is indicative of proactive policing. Responding to community intelligence, a number of warrants were carried out during this period with positive results, particularly in respect to the identification and disruption of cannabis farms. The council's public health team has identified that there's been a reduction, however, in the number of individuals who successfully completed alcohol and drug treatment in this quarter when compared with the previous year. Colleagues do suggest that COVID-19 will have had an impact on these outcomes, but during the summer a new integrated drug and alcohol treatment service has been launched to help people reduce their level of dependency, and a key priority of this service is to reduce the harm to individuals, significant others and the local community. Moving on to priority 3, the indicators are primarily police indicators at present, and in Hartlepool, domestic abuse incidents reported to the police during Q1 increased by 29%. That was 223 more incidents than in the same period in the previous year. The rate of repeat domestic abuse incidents also increased from 3.6 to 4.7 per thousand population. Referrals to all specialist domestic violences provided by Harbour in Hartlepool increased by 21%. However, refuge and supported accommodation referrals surged from 39 to 127, which translates to an increase of 226%. Domestic abuse workers from 13 Group have also reported a 71% increase compared to the same period in the previous year, an actual increase of 12 cases. So that's the information in relation to the priorities in Q1. I'll very quickly, Chair, go through Q2. Antisocial behaviour incidents actually reduced in Q2 by 11% compared to the previous year and by 39% compared to Q1. The easing of lockdown restrictions may explain the reduction in part. However, we'd need to do some more detailed analysis to identify the reasons behind these decreases. Again, you know, that wasn't unique in Hartlepool. Incidents to all 4 local policing areas reduced in Q2, and Hartlepool experienced the greatest percentage reduction of reported incidents. So in a reversal of Q1 figures, antisocial behaviour complaints received by councils by the Hartlepool Community Safety Team did increase slightly in this quarter compared to the same period last year, and ASB cases opened by 13 increased by just over a third. Although noise complaints in Q2 were 20% higher than in the previous year and slightly 2% higher than in Q1, the month-on-month complaints reduced with 70 in July, falling to 64 in August and 44 in September. But similar to Q1, complaints received 30% cite music as the noise causing the nuisance. Again, fly tipping reports increased by 54% compared to last year, but we did experience an increase of almost a quarter compared to Q1. Members may be aware that there's just been some recent publicity. We've recently had a successful conviction at court where a hefty fine was issued in relation to an individual from Hartlepool. The Hartlepool Community Safety Team is doing a lot of proactive work around identifying perpetrators and patrolling areas and encouraging the public to let us know through the council's contact centre when they're identifying sites where rubbish has been fly tipped. Deliberate fires across the whole of Cleveland reduced in Q2, although Hartlepool experienced a slight increase compared to the previous year and compared to Q1. Incidents actually reduced. So I know that we have Nick from the Fire Brigade in the call today, so when I've finished this, there may be something that the Fire Brigade can add. Drugs possession and supply offences increased in Q2 by 14% and 32% when compared with the previous year. Unfortunately, the Q2 data for the indicators in relation to drug and alcohol treatment are not available at this time. They won't actually be released till around about the 26th of November, so I've not been able to update the report with that information. Finally, domestic abuse incidents reported to the police during Q2 did reduce slightly by 2%. There was 18 less incidents than in the same period in the previous year and 61 less incidents than in Q1. The incidents in Q2 reduced month on month, 322 in July, 312 in August, falling to 292 in September. However, the repeat domestic abuse incidents increased slightly. However, the number of repeat incidents did reduce month on month. We don't have Q2 data from Harbour yet. However, they have adopted new ways of working to reach victims of domestic abuse, particularly in response to the increasing number of referrals at the height of lockdown the first time, and the inability to carry out face-to-face and group work with clients at that time. One of the innovations which Cleveland Police are pursuing down the same route has been the introduction of a live chat facility, which can be accessed via Harbour's website. It means anyone who wants to access services can now do so online in the evenings and at weekends. Harbour reports it's been extremely successful with clients engaging digitally where they'd previously been reluctant to seek support. Again, echoing what Mark was saying around people preferring to text, send messages as to sometimes actually speak to somebody in person. As part of an ongoing campaign to raise awareness of domestic abuse, the officers from the community safety team have been out visiting local hair and beauty salons. They've been handing out information, and many of the salons are now displaying posters to encourage victims of domestic abuse to speak to the police and signposting them to the organisations that offer support. Obviously, I'm aware that at the time of writing, hair salons were still open. Unfortunately, they have now had to close again. Domestic abuse support workers from 13 group reported a 2/3 increase in cases compared to the same period in the previous year. That was an actual increase of 12 cases and an increase of 41% compared to Q1. Again, Angela Corner is on the call from 13, so if Angela wishes to add anything at the end of this report, I would welcome her to do so. So if I return to the recommendations for this report, Chair, they are that the members of the Safer Hartlepool Partnership note and comment on the information provided for quarters 1 and 2, and that members consider the inclusion of additional performance indicators for future reports to assist them in monitoring the success of the community safety plan. The reason for these recommendations is that the Safer Hartlepool Partnership is responsible for overseeing the successful delivery of the community safety plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rachel. Just a couple of questions and comments from me, if I may. On the fly tipping, I think just for the benefit of those who may not have sight of the paperwork, although there is a significant rise in fly tipping, it does also include side waste to the green bins. Now, obviously, when people were at home a lot more, generally speaking, you're producing more waste because you're at home. And those numbers have also been included in there. So I think it would be interesting, Rachel, if we could get, it doesn't need to come back to this committee, but if it could be sent out separately, if it's possible to separate the numbers between what we would traditionally class as fly tipping and those incidents that are reported as side waste to the green bins, if possible.
Certainly, I'll take that back to the team, Chair, and ask for somebody to look at that for you.
Thank you. It's good news on Q1 for those completing drug treatment programs. That's really reassuring, and I'd be keen to see how that looks during Q2 when those figures come out. ASB reports, I think what was interesting in that is that during the first lockdown, when the police themselves started to receive more calls, and then ours from our community safety team dropped, and then in Q2, once the lockdown restrictions were eased, police ones dropped and then ours picked up. I would hope that that's kind of showing that people are getting a better understanding of what we can deal with, what the police can deal with, and that now people are accessing the correct teams. I mean, I may be wrong, but it does seem to show that that's the case, and I would hope that that is the case, and we're able to progress with that and keep on with it. But then, the biggest concern, obviously, was the domestic violence figures, especially during the first quarter. Now, I appreciate that they did drop during Q2, but what concerns me most is that we're now effectively in a second lockdown, and I worry that those figures are going to increase again. And so, for me, what I appreciate you were saying there, Rachel, about the work we've been doing with salons and what have you, but I think it's really important that as a borough council and partners who are on the call, if we can do everything we can to try and signpost those victims and potential victims right now during a time that is increased vulnerability for them, that's the right thing to do. And I think we need to do that, and we need to signpost people and make it services accessible as possible right now in a potential time of need. Is there any other questions or comments from other members? No, doesn't look like it. Oh, Angela.
Thanks, Chair. And from 13's point of view, we had seen quite a large increase in antisocial behaviour, the dog, and domestic abuse. Although some of this will be down to lockdown, we've actually, at the same period, we went into lockdown, we increased our ways to report. So we launched an antisocial behaviour app, new technology. So we and a new team as well. So we believe that some of this increase in ASB may be down to that. In terms of domestic abuse as well, we launched a full training programme for our repairs and maintenance team, all our frontline teams, to ensure that we identify at the earliest opportunity any signs of domestic abuse. And I think as an organisation, we're getting better at spotting those signs and referring to the right organisations, so which may have been one of the reasons why we've seen quite a large increase in that period as well. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you for that, Angela. Okay, if there's nobody else then, we'll move to the recommendations in the report. And if there is no dissent, we'll take those recommendations as they are. No one's showing any sign of dissent. Okay, thank you very much, members. There are no other agenda items that I consider urgent today, and that, just checking the agenda, sorry. I clearly need to go back to the optician, sorry. No, that's it. Thank you all very much. Thanks for your attendance. Have a good Friday and enjoy your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.